On behalf of GIDS Institute and on my own behalf, I welcome you all to this Golden Jubilee monthly lecture series. We are celebrating our Golden Jubilee, and we started the monthly lecture series in the month of August, and we are having 7th lecture today. So far, we have held 6 lectures last month. Due to unavoidable reasons, we had to postpone the lecture which was placed for February. We will be having it later. We had the lecture series. The first lecture was delivered by Professor Saibalkar, RBI Chair Professor from CSSS Calcutta. He gave a lecture on human capital and self-employment in India, followed by Professor Seema Batla, JNU. She spoke on structural transformation and agricultural productivity growth and convergence in Asian countries. The third lecture was by Professor KJ Joseph from GIFT, Trivandrum. He spoke on fiscal federalism in India. The fourth lecture was Professor Arup Mitra, South Asian University. He spoke on issues in urban development. And the fifth lecture was by Dr. Arjunan Subramanian from Glasgow University. His lecture was part of our joint work we are doing, myself and Professor Subbu. So he spoke on leveraging agriculture for alleviating micronutrient deficiency in India, followed by the sixth lecture by Professor Satish Chandra from Indonesia, who is a strategist and entrepreneur and economist. He spoke about the policies of climate change. So today we have the fortune of having Professor Achin Chakrabarti. He is Professor of Economics and former Director at Development Studies, Kolkata. He will be speaking on the topic reckoning, development and deprivation, the nature of contestation. Fortunately, we have Professor Amitabh Kundu, who very readily availed himself. He gave his accent, and he is the best person to chair on such a interesting topic. We are in the middle of election month, so the development and deprivation is a very, very contemporary issue, which probably will have the fortune to listen to Professor Achin. Also, we have our with us Dr. B.K. Mohanty. He has been professor at IIM Lucknow. He will be playing the role of discussant. So we have already distributed the brief abstract of the lecture. I think people have it, read it. Before we start, I just like to introduce today's chair, discussant, and briefly about the speaker. And then I'll ask Dr. Achin to start his lecture. Dr. Amitabh Kundu, the chairman of today's lecture. I have the fortune of knowing Professor Kundu, and I have been his student at JNU in CSRD during my MPhil and PhD. Although I did not do any coursework he was teaching, but we have been having guidance and listening to him for all along. Dr. Kundu is very well known. There is no need for introduction. Everybody knows him. The distinguished fellow at present at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries. He is chairing the committee. He was all along professor at CSRD for almost 35 years. He is chairing the committee overviewing the survey for Swachh Bharat Mission. He was regional advisor on poverty at UNESCO during 2017 and consultant to the government of Sri Lanka during 2016 until January 2014. He was professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He has been the Dean of School of Social Sciences, and he served as a member of National Statistical Commission during 2006 to 2008. He has been chairperson of the Post Structure Evaluation Committee set up by the Ministry of Minority Affairs and was a visiting professor at the University of Amsterdam. He was also at Paris, University of Kaiserslautern. I can't pronounce it. University of Weserberg in Germany. He has worked as director at various institutions in India, and he has been at the editorial board of Manpower Journal, Urban India, Journal of Education Planning and Administration, Indian Journal of Labor Economics. He has about 35 books, 35 number of books and 300 research articles. So very widely published and wrote, and he is we have been having the fortune of listening to him. Is a very good speaker. So we'll have the fortune of listening to his chairperson's remarks at the end of the lecture. Just a short brief profile of today's discussant, Professor B.K. Mohanty. Dr. Mohanty is former professor in the Decision Science Group at Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow. He received his MSc in Mathematics from Berhampur University, Orissa, India, and PhD in Operation Research from IIT Kharagpur, India. Prior to joining IIM Lucknow, he served at Tata Research Development and Design Center, Pune, as a member of technical staff as an associate professor at Xavier Institute of Management, Bhubaneswar, as scientist at CFTRI, Mysore. His research interests include fuzzy application in MD, MCDM, e-commerce, and various functional areas of management. To his credit, he has about 30 research publications in the journals of international repute, to name a few. These include International Journal of System Science, Fuji Sets and System, Expert System with Applications, Computers and Industrial Engineering, Computers and Finally, Professor Achin Chakrabarti, the today's speaker. Professor Achin Chakrabarti is Professor of Economics and former Director of the Institute of Development Studies, Kolkata, where he is working. Earlier, he was on the faculty of Center for Development Studies, CDS, Kerala. He has research interest in welfare economics, development economics, health economics, and political economy of India. He received his doctorate in economics from the University of California at Riverside, USA. He has very widely published in national and international journals, including Journal of Economic Theory, BMJ Global Health, Social Indicator Research Economics, Bulletin Journal of Quantitative Economics, Environment and Development Economics, EPW, of course, which is published from India. He co-edited 4 books: The Land Question in India, State Dispossession and Capitalist Transition from OUP, Changing Context and Shifting Roles of the Indian States, Springer in 2019, Capital in the East, Springer 2019, and Indian Business Groups and Other Corporations, Springer 2023. He jointly authored the book Limits of Bargaining, Capital, Labor, and the State in Contemporary India from Cambridge University Press. So we all know Professor Achin Chakrabarti is a jurist and very good economist. I have heard in the past. So looking forward, I welcome all 3 of them, Professor Kundu, Professor Mohanty, and Professor Achin Chakrabarti. And now I hand over the dais to Professor Kundu to just carry on the proceedings of this lecture. We'll have 30 to 40 minutes for the lecture, preferably 40-45 minutes. And then there will be discussant who will be presenting for 10 to 15 minutes. Then there can be some time for discussion from the floor. And then would like to listen to Professor Kundu, his chairperson's remarks. Over to you, Professor Kundu.
Thank you, Pramod, for this very kind and very longish introduction of all the 3 persons associated, which only can raise the expectations of the participants very high. I must say that it's a privilege always to listen to Professor Achin Chakrabarti. I had the privilege recently in Benares to listen to him in 2 of the sessions. But I have now today a disadvantage. I was a listener and I could comment, but now today I have to chair this session. So Pramod has made it sure that I'm properly disciplined and don't talk much on this. I don't want to really take any time right now. We have a very able commentator in Professor Mahanti. Professor Chakravarti, the floor is yours. You take 30 to 35 minutes as mentioned, then we'll have time for discussion. Professor Chakravarti.
Okay, thank you, Professor Kundu. Thank you very much. And I must thank Professor Pramod Kumar for inviting me to give this to present this lecture. And congratulations on your celebrations of the Institute. And also Professor Mahanti for having agreed to discuss my paper, which is unfortunately, which is not complete. So I couldn't share it with Professor Mahanti early on, but I'm sure that he would excuse me for this lapse of mine. And so it's really wonderful to present before this august audience, and particularly in presence of Professor Amitav Kundu. And as you know that, he's the most widely known expert on some of these issues. And incidentally, we had a long chat over 2 days, in fact, in Benares, when we attended the same conference, same seminar last week, and on similar issues. In fact, we continued our discussions then. So I learned a lot from Professor Kundu, and our conversation still continues. And hopefully what I present today, it will raise a lot of questions. And Professor Kundu, I'm also looking forward to learning from Professor Kundu on these issues. Let me start off with, I mean, the title, in fact, it looks pretty broad, but I'll focus on, okay, it's, I find it difficult to change the thing. It's not changing. I think this slideshow mode is creating some problem. I can't change the slide, but it is changing now. So is it okay if I do it this way? Can you see the slide changing?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, okay. But if I go to slideshow. Oh, yeah, now it's coming. Yeah, it's now coming, right? Yeah. Okay. So just briefly, yeah. Okay. So just a bit of prelude. The process of development is essentially qualitative in nature. We all know that. And development is usually seen nowadays as expansion of the real freedom of people to do what people have reason to value. And as you can see that I'm basically following Amartya Sen's definition of development as freedom. So as expansion of the real freedom of people to do what people have reason to value. But even though it's a qualitative process, but we need to identify certain quantifiable aspects of development. I mean, this is very important because all we can do is we can identify certain quantifiable aspects of development. Of course, I mean, because all these discussions about why don't you take up this indicator or not that indicator, that kind of discussion we can avoid to a great extent, because most of these multidimensional measures, because freedom is multidimensional, so we need multidimensional measures. And there's different quantifiable aspects of development we can talk about, but we cannot talk about all aspects, all quantifiable aspects of development, only a certain. So quantification involves value judgment. And this also I emphasize always when it comes to these indicators and indices and things like that. Quantification involves value judgment. And I'll talk specifically about certain indices and how this value judgment actually matters there. And as we know that value is always plural, so I emphasize this plurality of values. And any measure of development, therefore, has to be multidimensional. So basically, when I talk about development, I talk about certain multidimensional measure of development. And the obvious multidimensional measure that comes to our mind is Human Development Index. So my illustrations will be in terms of Human Development Index for development, and for deprivation, my illustrations will be in terms of multidimensional poverty index and MPI. And as you know that in the recent past, there is a second report on National Multidimensional Poverty Index by Niti Aayog of India. And I'll briefly talk about that as well. But my overall thrust of the presentation will be slightly broader than the nitty-gritty of specific indices, the general principles, and where the contestation actually comes from. And this contestation is part of it, because whenever you see a new index or some new formula for an index, immediately you see that the series of discussions and papers come out, and basically pointing out different aspects of the index, and sometimes criticizing, and sometimes suggesting that something to be replaced by something else, things like that. So we are familiar with that kind of discussions, debates. And so that's why my focus here is on this contestation aspect of it. And I believe that this contestation is extremely important in the context of measuring, reckoning development. So reckoning development is an evaluative exercise, and that requires multiplicity of value judgment. And we have to recognize that the value judgment is multiple, is plural. And that's why the contestation also continues. So it's not that, it's a kind of, there's nothing defeatist if we accept that it is contested, it is debated, it is criticized. There's nothing defeatist about it, because we know that any measurement will be contested. Anyway, so the basic motivation of this presentation is that if you look at this, what is called normative measurement theories. Normative measurement theories, there's a huge literature on that, which is a part of, which is a branch of welfare economics, where these measurement issues are talked about in a theoretical way. These normative measurement theories, and those who specialize in these normative measurement theories, they often complain that indices are chosen without the benefit of the large theoretical literature on normative measurement. James Foster, for instance, he's well known because many of you probably heard about this FGT index, the Foster-Greer-Thorbecke poverty index, FGT index of poverty. So that James Foster. And James Foster wrote a piece, I think in the mid-90s in American Economic Review, where in fact he raised this issue that there's a large gap between what the specialists in normative measurement theories do and the index and indices and their applications. So there's a large gap, and that gap seems to be unbridgeable because of a variety of reasons. So I'm just trying to understand this gap and where exactly or how we can actually pinpoint the reason for this gap. So so that's the motivation, and so therefore the focus of this presentation is that basically I'll briefly go over the theoretical developments in normative measurement as we go along with the examples, and to what extent these theoretical developments have informed the applied field of comparative assessment of progress. So I broadly call it comparative assessment of progress. No matter whether it's HDI, it's a measure of progress or development, or deprivation, that's a lack of it, that is deprivation, that is MPI. We may also talk about the distribution of this, but for the time being, because in half an hour or 35 minutes, I cannot talk about all the aspects of it. So I'll focus basically on these two, HDI and MPI, and where exactly this contestation comes from in each case. So quickly, the current Human Development Index that we see every year when the Human Development Report appears, the international, UNDP's Human Development Report comes out, we see that these countries are ranked according to HDI, and we know that from exactly 2010, in fact, there is a big change in how we calculate a Human Development Index. And that change actually happened on one part of the index. Basically, the indicators remain more or less the same, some changes here and there, but the aggregation formula completely changed. Earlier, it was arithmetic mean, and then from 2010, they have adopted geometric mean. And that has continued for the past 14 years or so. And what we see that, for the past 14 years, the same formula of aggregation that is continuing. So what is it? It is basically, this is the thing that for education and health, we take it like x minus x mean and x max minus x mean divided by x max minus x mean, which is quite well known. And for income, we change the GNI per capita at PPP dollar, we change it into logarithm. So HDI is just the geometric mean of these three transformed indicators, transformed variables, not the original variables, but the transformed variables. And this transformation is done by this kind of what is called normalization. So this is the idea that HDI is a geometric mean of this. Now, immediately, there are a lot of responses to this that, but what is the justification of UNDP for this change? The basic justification was that the objective was to avoid perfect substitutability of old HDI, because old HDI, which has been there for long, since the 1990, and for 20 years, they followed that arithmetic mean. And arithmetic mean, as you know, that each component actually is perfectly substitute of other. And this perfect substitutability, according to them, was bothering them. So that's why they changed it to geometric mean. But in fact, by doing that, they actually brought in more problems than they solved by doing it. So we'll briefly discuss that. What are the problems that actually are there in a geometric mean formula? People have already pointed this out. The most important critic of that was by Martin Ravalian, and also there is a series of papers in the Journal of Economic Inequality, where in fact quite a few articles actually looked into some of these implications of that. And more recently, in fact, even Sudhir Anand in 2018, he had an occasional paper for UNDP where he brought in these issues again, and basically bringing in this point. So just briefly, what is the point of HDR 2010? The justification for changing formula was that poor performance in any dimension is now directly reflected in the HDI, and there is no longer perfect substitutability across dimensions. I mean, these statements are, I must say that, it's not really very clear that what exactly they mean. But anyway, this perfect substitutability, what they're talking about, is not perfect substitutability across the three dimensions. The perfect substitutability across the transformed values of the dimensions, right? So it's a transformed values which are perfectly substituted. So you never know that whether each of these dimensions, actual dimensions, were perfect substitutes or not. Now, this is the first point that one can make, that actually the scaled indices, the normalized indices, were indicators were perfect substitutes, not the core dimensions. Core dimensions were health, education, and living standard. So health, education, living standard, if you take them as core dimensions, in case of health, it's life expectancy at birth. In case of education, it is the mean years of schooling combined with expected years of schooling. And then income. which is GNI per capita at purchasing power parity dollar, and with a log scale. So basically, it's a scaled indicator, scaled index indicator turned into index by this transformation. And basically, the scaled indices were perfect substitutes, not the code dimensions. That's the first point that we can make. I'm just reading out from HDR 2010. Now, this method captures how well-rounded a country's performance is across the 3 dimensions. This method means the geometric mean formula. As a basis for comparisons of achievement, this method is also more respectful of the intrinsic differences in the dimensions that a simple average is. It recognizes that health, education, and income are all important, but also that it is hard to compare these different dimensions of well-being, and that we should not let changes in any of them go unnoticed. Now, this is quite vague statement, actually. I mean, what do you mean by that, going unnoticed? I mean, in the earlier formula, no indicator actually had any chance of going unnoticed. It's not that, when you transform it from arithmetic mean to geometric mean, then only you solve this problem of going unnoticed. As a matter of fact, if you use geometric mean, then there is a possibility that a change in one dimension may go unnoticed. Why is it so? It's a very simple, arithmetic. I'm coming to that. So, I mean, this is the point. The point is that, any dimension, if any dimension actually approaches the minimum value, because x max minus x mean is your in a denominator, right? So if any actual value approaches the minimum value, then what happens? Then HDI approaches 0, because that dimension, that x minus x mean, becomes close to 0. Now, since it is a multiplicative formula, so if any of these transformed variable approaches 0, then the whole thing becomes 0, right? So as x approaches x minimum, like, think about maybe Zimbabwe or some country where for some of the indicators, in fact, it's close to the x minimum. Now, if that is the case, then whatever happens to your other dimensions, because of this close to 0, the one dimension is close to 0, and it is a multiplicative formula, the whole thing actually is pretty low. HDI becomes pretty low. So no matter how high your achievement is on the other dimensions, because of this one dimension where it is close to x minimum, your entire HDI value actually comes closer to 0. Now, this is a real problem because, people have shown that. Martin Ravallen's paper, in fact, pointed this out. And this is the kind of problem that, again, I mean, Sudhir Anand also raised this issue of this problem, that there is a problem that the countries which have a very low achievement value for one dimension, then the chances are that the whole HDI will be pretty low because of the pool of that particular dimension. Anyway, so and the second problem that actually comes up is this: that is, since it's a multiplicative formula, just think about if the health index changes, what happens to HDI? Okay, so if there is a change in health index, what happens to HDI? What happens to HDI? That should be a partial derivative of the formula. And there, in fact, it is directly related to your level of education and your level of income, and indirectly related to level of health. So it is okay that as health increases, then your additional contribution of health to HDI may be lower because, health comes with a negative thing, -2/3. So it comes into the denominator. So it's inversely related. So partial derivative is inversely related to the level of health, but directly related to your level of education and income. Now that creates another problem. The problem is that you see that if your income is pretty low, then you get one kind of increment in your HDI for your health improvement. But if your income is very high, then you get another, you get larger increment in your HDI for the same improvement in health. For instance, if your life expectancy at birth, if it increases by 1 year for Zimbabwe, and 1 year in let's say Luxembourg. Now, 1 year in Luxembourg and 1 year in Zimbabwe, the increment in HDI will be pretty different, hugely different. Why? Because their incomes are different. So since it is dependent on the level of income where you are actually measuring the change in health index, in other words, in terms of calculus, it is called cross-partial derivative, and cross-partial derivative is positive in this case. Now, if cross-partial derivative is positive, then you see that it's a very perverse kind of implication that for low-income countries, any improvement in health will contribute very little to HDI, and for high-income countries, the same improvement in health will contribute a lot more to HDI. Now, this is a very a paradoxical kind of implication for just because you are using geometric mean formula. So I'll skip some of these points. The point that I'm trying to emphasize is that here is a formula, geometric mean, which is being used for the past 13 or 14 years. Without really reflecting on that formula, even though there has been a series of critiques on that, particularly this geometric mean formula. Even in fact, long back, S. Chakraborty of ISI Kolkata had a very influential paper, and many people actually cite that paper. And in that paper, S. Chakraborty, in fact, generalized the Human Development Index with a formula, which is kind of generalized formula, and that avoids these positive cross-partial derivatives between dimensions. So that's a good thing. Okay, but the other issue with that formula, why it may create problem, that is if you think about the formula is not with me, but anyway, so it is actually this, if you are familiar with this CES kind of production function, this constant elasticity of substitution production function kind of thing, it is like that actually. So so there, in fact, it depends on the value of the power, that beta. So anyway, so you avoid this extreme substitutability. You avoid the problem of this one dimension being 0, which is driving the entire result. You avoid these two extremes, and something in between you can settle on. So this is a good way of making a little bit of progress. But the problem is that because each dimension then shows diminishing marginal return. Now this is something which is again this value judgment. Now why this value judgment, is it acceptable? That means as life expectancy increases, then every increment actually adds less and less to your HDI, which is diminishing marginal returns. That means as life expectancy increases, then it's not linearly increasing HDI, it's actually increasing HDI at a diminishing rate. Now, is that acceptable? Because life expectancy, increment of life expectancy at a higher level is even more difficult. So you actually achieve a commendable, you do a commendable job if you can raise it from 78 years to 79 years. It's a hard work. So you have done that, and then it adds very little to your HDI. So because as it goes up, then it adds less and less to your. So this is a kind of disturbing property that Chakraborty's formula actually has. So in other words, now this is, I'm not saying that this is a bad formula, that is a good formula. The point here that I'm trying to make is that each and every formula that you look at, maybe one formula is slightly better than the other, but it may bring in additional problems if you actually try to apply it. So this is the point that I'm trying to say. So you have to make a kind of comparisons of different properties of different formula, and then come down to a kind of subset of that, and then go on doing that. So that would be a better, I mean, that would be a good approach to do your applied work. But anyway, so this is the point that I made, that since each of the three attributes of income, health, and education is a good, the law of marginal, I mean, this is Professor Chakraborty's point, Satya Chakraborty's paper. The law of diminishing marginal utility should apply to each of them. You may not agree with that, and I don't agree with that. So, but this is the property that is displayed by his formula, and this value judgment actually will reappear when at the end I talk about change, improvement, because HDI is a ranking of the countries now. Now, when you look at this improvement in, let's say, life expectancy at birth over time for several countries or several states of India, then you have additional problems. That is how you actually reckon improvements. And then this point again comes up, whether you follow this diminishing marginal utility or increasing difficulty. I mean, increasing difficulty, as I said, that when life expectancy reaches 70 years or 75 years, then it would be more difficult to raise it further. So in that case, you have to reward the country which has raised it further. So which means that you need a different value judgment, just the opposite value judgment, not the diminishing marginal utility kind of value judgment. You see how complex it gets, as you go along. Anyway, so the point here is that here is a formula which actually takes care of that positive cross partial derivative, but it brings in additional issue of this diminishing marginal contribution to HDI. Diminishing marginal, it's not utility in this case, it is diminishing marginal contribution to HDI. And that may be problematic. Yeah, so I have the formula. So this is the formula that Satya Chakraborty actually suggested, okay? And you know that this is a kind of, this is additively separable formula, and beta, it's a I1 is the index, one of the index, let's say it's a health index, and then to the power beta, and W's are weights. So this is the most general form of HDI that can take. And for particular values, if you take beta equal to 1, you get arithmetic mean. If you take beta equal to 0, you get geometric mean, etc., etc. So this is the most general formula that one can use. But as I said, this beta between 0 and 1 will give a diminishing contribution of the indicator to HDI. For instance, if you take partial derivative by HDI with respect to I1, then if beta is less than 1, then it is a kind of diminishing thing that you get. It's a concave kind of function. Anyway, so this is what the most general form of HDI that could take, but again, it's not perfectly usable because of this. And the other problem is that it looks pretty complicated, because ultimately HDI is something which has to be simple. That is, people would readily understand what is going on. So if you make a very complicated formula for your composite index, then people may reject it and people may not understand it. So because it has a lot of policy implications, so it has to be very simple. So that's the other point. Now, the next point that usually we miss out is that you see that in HDI, there are 3 indicators, and one of them actually, that is income component. You don't take income as such, you take logarithm of that. Now, why? Why logarithm? Why logarithm of per capita income? So I think the general belief is that, if income goes up, and then as income goes up, then diminishing contribution of income to HDI, which is widely accepted, because if it goes beyond $80,000, and then, or one country has 1,000, another country 80,000, do you say that it's 80 times more HDI is implied by that? You'd hesitate to say that. So that's why income component is always a kind of diminishing or concave kind of formula they have used. So the current HDI actually uses that logarithm formula. just to motivate you, why income component is transformed into logarithm makes good sense. It's not statistical point, it's ethical point or normative point. Let me emphasize that, because statisticians say that, okay, income is usually skewed, it's a skewed distribution. So if it is not normal distribution, skewed distribution, then if you just transform it into logarithm, you get a kind of close to normal distribution. So that's not the issue. It's not a statistical point. It's an ethical or normative point. What is the normative point? The normative point is this. Just think about these countries, okay? Now, India's per capita GNI at PPP dollar is 6,590. On the other hand, the highest income is Qatar, and then Luxembourg, and so that's 87,000 and 84,000, something like that. Now, just imagine a vertical line like this. So this vertical line, what is the midpoint of this vertical line? It is 46,862. I do this experiment sometimes, when I meet students, and I ask them that, okay, so where do you put New Zealand? Above the midpoint or below the midpoint? Where do you put New Zealand? Now, most of the responses are usually that New Zealand is above the midpoint. Why? Because actually New Zealand's per capita GNI at PPP dollar is 44,500. It should be slightly below the midpoint. So people are surprised. Oh, is it so? Now, why is it happening? I mean, they're not wrong. I think that in our imagination, we know that New Zealand is a developed country, and Luxembourg is also a developed country. So these developed countries are all look-alike kind of thing, right? So New Zealand is actually closer to India rather than closer to Qatar or Luxembourg in terms of income. So this point actually we miss out. Why? Because our thinking is that when it becomes high income country, then we fail to make a distinction between very high income and not so high income. It's very difficult because in terms of visible living standard, and in terms of HDI indicators, you see more or less similar, right? So that's why it makes good sense that higher incomes are discounted and higher incomes actually add very little to HDI. I think that's the point. So that's why this logarithmic thing actually makes a good sense. So this is what is called this valuation, and we call it valuation. The valuation is entirely, as you can notice, it is entirely normative exercise. There's no no given formula as such. It's a normative exercise. That means, given your value judgment about certain indicator, then you apply certain formula based on that normative judgment. So this value judgment, normative judgment is always important in case of this kind of transformation and this kind of index. Let me just quickly go now move on to this poverty business. Now, poverty just after MPI, particularly Niti Aayog's MPI, National Multidimensional Poverty Index, NMPI, I would say. There are a series of articles in newspapers and in other places, and people have raised several issues on that. And if you go through this Niti Aayog's report, the methodology section, you will see that the argument is entirely in terms of a very, what should I say? It's they're giving this argument that it is based on reasonable theories. I mean, the theory is that Alker and Foster 2007, where they provided the theory for this multidimensional poverty index. But if you look closely at the theory, what the theory says is that the theory actually gives you some kind of formula for aggregation. In case of any multidimensional index, all the theory can do is the theory gives some formula for aggregation. And that is exactly what Alker-Foster paper did, that some aggregation for this multidimensional poverty index. But there is another part of poverty measurement, that is what is called identification. And Amartya Sen, for the first time, in fact, he made this distinction between these two, that in any exercise of measuring poverty, you have two parts. One part is identification, that is identifying who is poor and who is not, which means that you need a kind of cutoff. And of course, the space, if the space is income, then the cutoff has to be in terms of income. And if it is, if the space is non-income, then you have to have appropriate cutoff. So this is identification. So anyone below that cutoff will be identified as poor. Now that is identification part. And remember that till the mid-70s, most of the debates on poverty measurement in India, in fact, the other day we are talking about that, Professor Kundu and myself. And if you notice that, there's most of the Sukhatme and Minhas and Srinivasan, so all of them actually, Gopalan, all of them actually focused on this identification part. That is a kind of calorie-based kind of norm. And that norm actually, and then you get the data from National Sample Survey. And on the basis of that, you arrive at a kind of cutoff level of MBCE, which will actually give you the poverty line. And that entire debate was on that, that how you actually arrive at the poverty line, starting from some kind of nutritional norm. That's the identification part. So this entire debate was on identification, but not much on aggregation part, because all we had was basically the headcount ratio, the headcount index. So poverty headcount index was the aggregation formula, but we had a lot on identification part, a lot of contestation on identification. But in the mid-70s, particularly Amartya Sen's 1976 paper, Poverty and Ordinal Approach, from that paper, in fact, the discourse completely shifted. From identification, then actually the focus shifted to aggregation. Amartya Sen was the first person who actually raised this issue, saying that, look, this headcount ratio is too simple. It's good that headcount ratio can actually convey the meaning, but the point is there are some practical problems with headcount ratio, because if you want to give the direction, policy direction to the policymakers or the those who are implementing certain policies, if they are focused on headcount ratio, then they will focus only on the people just below the poverty line, because if they spend a little bit on these people below the poverty line, they will be above the poverty line, and it will be reflected in your headcount ratio. So yes,
if you don't conclude in another 5 minutes, you will have very little time for discussion.
Yeah, I'll conclude.
Yeah,
I'll conclude.
5 minutes. Yes.
So yeah. So this identification from identification to aggregation, that is the kind of thing that we see in income poverty. And then then we have a series of papers on this aggregation part, and then we come to this multidimensional poverty index. The multidimensional poverty index, as I said, that I think by now all of you know probably that there are 12 indicators, and 12 indicators are classified into 3 classes. One is that health, 2 indicators, and then education, 2 indicators, and then health 3 indicators, education 2 indicators, and then living standard 7 indicators. Altogether, you have 12 indicators. Now, and it says that it follows Alker-Foster counting approach. Okay, but my point is that basically it is, series of critics, including Professor Amitav Kundu, Kundu and James in EPW, Maiti and Mehrotra in the War, Mohanty Mishra and Maiti in EPW. So a series of articles which actually criticize different aspects of MPI, like Mehrotra in Deccan Herald, and then Rangarajan and Mahadev in the Hindu. So all of them had several points to make. And if you just summarize the major points are like this. There are many key indicators which are absent. Fine. Inclusion of dubious indicators, because some of the indicators, like for instance, banking. The other day, in fact, we are discussing about this addition of banking. or this having bank accounts should be considered as a part of poverty measure or not. So inclusion of dubious indicators, reliability of urban poverty estimates, which actually Sanjay Mahanti and others, they have mentioned that most of these poverty estimates from NFHS, urban poverty estimates from NFHS, it may not be reliable because of the small size of the sample for some of the urban units. And major point was that must not replace consumption-based measure of poverty. And the point is that just after that, we have this 2022-23 National Sample Survey data out. I mean, not data, but the report. And we have consumption-based measure now. So now you cannot make that criticism that, on the basis of MPI, you say that poverty has declined sharply. 135 million people are out of poverty between 2015-16 and 2019-21. And that was questioned on the basis of that, saying that, look, I mean, since we don't have a basis to compare this with consumption-based measure, but now we have consumption-based measure. So now I think that it's a very, very crucial juncture that we are in now, and more work need to be done just to, looking into this, what consumption-based measure of poverty actually says, and what this multidimensional poverty index says. Just 1 or 2 points about multidimensional poverty index. And to be fair to the Niti Aayog has mentioned this. The MPI complements monetary poverty measures by capturing additional information, including broader qualitative aspects of it. It complements. So MPI is not a substitute for consumption-based measure. Neither is consumption-based measure substitute for MPI. So they actually measure two different things. So the last point that I would like to make is that if you remember that, or if you go back in 2011, there's a series of paper on this MPI itself, because when this UNDP started this MPI, and MPI, there's a series of paper on MPI in 2011 in Journal of Economic Inequality. And there, in fact, quite a few points were raised. One point was, I would say that this is a very important point by Martin Ravelin, that since there are countless possibilities for forming composite indices by some ad hoc aggregation, so he suggested that some kind of dashboard method would be better. In other words, that you just have a dashboard of different indicators, and then since you want to make it relevant for public policy, so the public policies actually cannot be based on a composite index. So public policies have to be based on single indicators and where actually you falter, and then you make it up. So public policies have to be based on these singular indicators rather than composite. But their invocation of Alkire-Foster doesn't solve it. The invocation of Alkire-Foster doesn't solve it simply because it takes all the measures as given, like dimensions, like cutoffs, like weights. They're all given. So Alkire-Foster is no guide for choosing your dimensions and cutoffs and all. So the devil is in these details. That is what Ravelin spoke about. But my last point would be that the devil is in details and is in interpretations. Now, how we interpret the numbers from MPI, that also matters a great deal. This is my last point. I think I have used up my time. This is my last point. The estimates indicate that rural areas saw a faster reduction in their MPI value compared to urban areas. That is what Niti Aayog's report says. The incidence of poverty fell from 32 point something to 19 point something in rural areas compared to a decline in 8.65 to 5. Now, immediately what you can see is that there is a large gap between rural and urban. But instead of focusing on that, you're actually focusing on the change in rural and change in urban, but not the large gap between rural and urban. What does it mean? It means that, well, I mean, since rural is already 32.59, so the decline will definitely more than the decline in urban. So that's not the point. The point is that there is a large gap between urban and rural. Bihar, the state with the highest MPI value in NFHS4 saw the fastest reduction in MPI value in absolute terms, with the proportion of multidimensional code reducing from this. Now, the point is that why do you have to look at this? Because if you plot all the states MPI value in 2015-16 and change in MPI between 15-16 and 1921, you see a very strong correlation between the two. In other words, those who have a high MPI value in 15-16, they are most likely to have a greater change, greater decline in MPI value. Now, that is a kind of obvious point. So in other words, my point would be that when you interpret a composite index and its change improvement, then I think you should take care of these issues, like how the change is actually related to the base value. Thank you very much. I stop here. I had a last this thing recording change, because the other day I wrote something on that, but for the sake of time I skipped that. Yeah, this is the formula that you asked for, Professor Kundu. Amartya Sen's. Yeah, you asked for this formula, Amartya Sen's formula, that improvement index. Yeah, this is the one instead of percentage change. Anyway, so I'm not going to discuss this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't know of many people who can combine the theoretical and empirical issues of measurement so very effectively and so very lucidly. So I think it's been one of the very, very rich and very, very, clear presentation, raising some of the...
If you close this, then we will have the larger screen available.
I'm going to raise some of the very important issues of measurement of both development as well as deprivation. Only point is that when we have, this is 4:30, I was planning to I thought that we'll be finishing by 5 o'clock, but nonetheless, let's open it for discussion. Let's see how many questions are there, as I think it's the norm and protocol that the chairman comes.
Even let us have the discussion remarks and then go for the open.
Sorry, Pramod?
Let's have the discussion remarks first. Mohanty.
No, well, we will have the discussant now to present, comment, and then we will have open and question and answer. Right, Pramod? That's what you're saying?
Yes, sir, yes.
But I have to leave at 5 o'clock. So you have to, I thought, as you said in the beginning, that the presentation will take 35 minutes. So it has taken much longer than that. So how do you schedule? Do we have...
we can have 10 minutes each, 10 minutes discussion, 10 minutes your remarks, and 10 minutes Mohanty.
Well, we have 10 minutes for the discussant. And then maybe we have 10 minutes for the question answer. And then I will take 5 to 7 minutes. And then I'll leave it up to Professor Mohanty to conduct the session, because I think it is unfair to conclude the session at 5 o'clock. Yeah, so, but I have to leave at 5. So I will take 5 to 7 minutes at the end. But let's start with the Professor Mohanty's comments without any loss of time. Professor Mohanty, please try to be brief. 10 minutes. Right? Professor Mohanty, are you ready?
Hello. Sorry, there was a disconnection.
We can see Baba Mohanty now.
Can I speak now?
Yes, go ahead. I think unless there is a signal from the GIDS.
There is a signal problem. Can I speak now, Dr. Pramod?
Yeah, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
I have heard the lecture of Professor Chakrabarti. It is a very nice lecture. In fact, personally, I learned something, whatever it has been told by Professor Chakrabarti, and thank you, Professor Chakravarti, for this. And Professor Kundu, he has given some suggestions also. Very nice. I have a little comment only, little, though I have learned the subject properly. And basically, Professor Chakravarti spoken about the development, and it is to be quantifiable and which is of multidimensional. And instead of quantifiable, if I am wrong, kindly correct me. Value judgment is being given, and the Human Development Index, and there is a MPI, and this is also multidimensional. For example, health, education, and income. My only suggestion is there are normative approaches and some other formula. It has been given and suggested by Professor Chakravarti. The only thing I can speak here, these things possibly, I am telling possibly, not it will be, can be well structured and can be better improved if it can go via analytical tools. And one of them is optimization. For example, multiple criteria decision making, because it is multidimensional. The first criterion, you can take it as a health. Second criterion, you can take as education. Third criterion, you can take as an income. And this is to be combined. And the combination, it has been suggested to be done by using normative index. And my suggestion is there are methodologies are available that you can combine these, that is known as aggregation procedure. And since health, education, income, as well as development or value judgment, whatever you call, these are qualitatively defined. Possibly, fuzzy logic is a tool which can quantify the qualitatively defined items. So, fuzzy MCDM will be of very helpful, programmable, is an analytical tool to describe these things, and this is my suggestion. But finally, I must say that I have learned something on socioeconomic which has been told by Professor Chakravarti. That's all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mohanty. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I open now for question answers? Professor Mohanty has been extremely brief and raised a very, very fundamental issue. Can we have questions from the floor? Comments? Just a minute.
Anyone from the online?
It's not, current is not coming there.
Can I make an observation, please?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Chakravarti. It was an excellent talk. I did go to Niti Aayog and I worked with Ramesh Chandji and the person who has prepared the report. We had long discussion on that. But I am with Professor Chakravarti. What happens in our country is that we come out with something, but we don't have the rigor. Unless we brought rigor in this exercise, I don't think we will have the right kind of policies that we should have. He made a very interesting point, and that was really very interesting. You have to look, I think, segregate the population. And by segregating the population, then I think we should rework on the aggregates. After reworking on the aggregates, I think we should come, then I think, we can consolidate. The point there is, that as a policymaker, we should have not only one option. Suppose Pramod Kumarji is there, and Pramod Kumarji is the policymaker. If you give him one option, then what can he do? We have to put multiple options before Pramod Kumarji and then see which option can be a viable option. That's one. Number two, I think Dr. Chakravarti again made a very interesting point. India, as Prime Minister says, we always say, Ek Bharat, Shresth Bharat. But Ek Bharat also has, plurality. That was a very, very interesting point. And we can't, I think, overlook that point. Now, keeping that in mind, I think we have to see at what stage different, units of the country are there. And then we should, I think, take that perspective. And in the light of that perspective, we have to evolve policies, right kind of policies for the state and right kind of policy for the center. So given all that, I should say that he has again opened, I think, I should not say Pandora's box, but then I think these are very, very interesting thoughts. And there is a need, I think, for all of us to come not only with mathematical solutions. We have gone one step ahead. Yes, that's good. But after coming to these mathematical solutions, we should say what is the final, view that we want to present. So if we have got 10, 15, 20 such packages, I'm sure, I think, those packages, then they can become an objective, proposals for discussion. And then out of that discussion, something can emerge which may be agreeable, I think, to people at large. Of course, we need to improve, I think, these kind of exercises. Always, I think we have to keep on improving. But in our case, what happens is that we make a decision, I think, in a great hurry. And then we don't change, I think, our decisions as per the needs of the time, and also as it is based on the data, experiments, and these kind of issues. Thank you so much. It was really a great deal of learning, and it was a very, very interesting presentation. And I must thank Professor Kundu. I think his presence makes it much more interesting and thoughtful. Thank you so much.
Anybody else? From the floor here? Any point? We at GIRI also, we are in the process of measuring the multidimensional poverty for Uttar Pradesh. And our team is struggling to get the samples selected because we are trying to have the involvement of the state government at the district and block level, and it's very difficult. Working it out at the ground is very difficult. We can have all these theoretical formulas and we can put it here. I have worked on public distribution system, and I've seen how this actually what Professor Dr. Ram was saying, how it works at the ground level. In the villages, if you go and see how the people below poverty line is chosen, the duty is of the panchayat. And in villages, the moment panchayat changes, the list itself completely changes. There is a different set of poor in one panchayat. After the selection of new panchayat, after the election, the poverty line will, whatever theoretical line you have, but the numbers, the people who were below poverty, they all become above poverty, and new list comes up of identification other poor people. So identification is the biggest issue here. That too at the ground level, how to select. You are not going to select the people at the national level. It has to be done at the decentralized level, and that is where I think as Professor Achin said, the formula has to be very simple, which needs to be understood. If we put a very complex kind of theoretical this thing, it will not be policymaker at the capital will not be able to understand, forget about the authorities at the district level and at the village level. I think these are very, very important issues, and we are having multi-poverty now, but we need to see what we were having with the NSS data, the real poor based on the basic consumption, which probably need also to be taken into account while having the multi-dimension, and appropriate weight needs to be given for consumption, because that is the basic we provide nutrition, and that is linked to the actual living standard at the ground level.
Yeah.
I would like to add the issue of inclusion and exclusion of persons is also very important, because year to year, even within a 6 months, some persons are included in the, they are above the poverty line, and some person are excluded also, because if the one person who are the breadwinner, basically the main earner of the family, maybe has died recently for any reasons, now the family are actually below the poverty line, the person getting the good job, they may be the issue of exclusion and inclusion at the ground level, and the continued monitoring of the issue is also very important.
May I respond to both your point and Professor Pramod Kumar's point? Yeah, I agree with you that there are a lot of nuances at the ground level when it comes to micro level. So my point would be that MPI kind of tool has a specific purpose, and every composite index has a specific purpose. And if you want to extend it further to understand the local level development or development at the block level, I think that is inappropriate. Why? Because at the local level, you have multiple sources of information. But MPI is constrained by just one household survey, that is NFHS. It has to be one household survey from where you have to draw all this information, right? And when it comes to local level development or even development at the block level, I won't suggest that the same MPI should be used here. We should not, because MPI is constrained by the structure of it.
Yeah.
And so as we go down, then MPI actually doesn't add anything to our understanding. So for our understanding, you need to have, maybe land distribution, maybe how the, as we are saying, exclusion. So different forms of exclusion. So it's not just poverty or deprivation, it is exclusion. So as you have rightly said, that it is exclusion. So you need to focus on those kind of research questions, which actually cannot be addressed by MPI. So MPI is just a kind of way to rank different entities, and those entities up to district level, it is fine, because at the national government, the national government actually wants that kind of ranking. So up to district level is fine. But within a state, when we talk about development of different blocks, or even areas within blocks, then I think we need to go into much details instead of forming a composite index. Composite index actually loses information. Composite index is just a single number, but you have different indicators, and you lose all the information as soon as you make the composite index. So composite index, I won't promote at the block level. So composite index up to district level, it's fine, whatever purpose that the national government has on that. But as a researcher, I think that we have better sources of information and better understanding of the analytics of development at the ground level. So that's all I would say.
Actually, that is true, but the problem is if you have some other set of indicators for identification of poor, and you have a multi-poverty which tells other number, then matching may be much bigger problem.
Even the recent released data of the Niti Aayog, which is based on the NFHS data, they give the figure for rural and urban differently. Recently, Professor A.K. Singh has published a paper in EPW, and he raised the question. Then I also go through the NFHS, especially for the UP. the sample of NFHS data, particularly some districts of urban area of Uttar Pradesh, is very small. Even NFHS also said a remark in their report कि वो उन्होंने वहां से डाटा कलेक्ट ही नहीं किया है. But I don't know how Niti Aayog, based on NFHS data, released the all poverty index for all the districts for rural and urban. I mean, and show the better position comparatively. The
So
last
that people have already pointed out that, as I said, that there's this particular paper by Sanjay Mohanty and Uday Mishra. I think that there is this issue that NFHS, to what extent it is reliable, that up to what level. Particularly these urban estimates have problems. I mean, you cannot say that MPI at the for urban and rural, and I mean it's not very robust actually. So anyway, so these are the issues, which these are the challenges. But I would say that these challenges are worth talking about, so that you can have a better way of doing things. Maybe next time we have a more innovative way of looking into poverty question. But the identification point, I agree, because different government programs have some kind of identification issue. Like earlier we had the socio-economic caste census, long back, that rural development, Ministry of Rural Development promoted that. And we had these 12 or 13 indicators in that socio-economic caste census.
Yeah.
And on the basis of that, we identified the BPL households, right? So it was a very specific purpose that on the basis of that, we identified BPL households. But MPI actually doesn't have that kind of purpose, that you cannot identify the poor households from MPI, because it's all aggregated in such a way that you really cannot identify the poor households on the ground. So that's why you need a separate kind of identification exercise. It's not that MPI will help you to do.
But Achin, the problem is if the government is taking a decision based on MPI, saying that this state has only 5% poverty and the other state has 12% poverty. So the distribution of the resources goes in that proportion. But if you measure poverty by other indicators, it might be much higher.
Yeah. I mean, I would suggest that, take the state MPI as given. Now, given the state MPI, and then if the, central government says that, okay, your MPI is this, how do you frame your policies now? Now, then I'll go on framing policies on the basis of each indicator of that MPI, right? So on which indicator, in fact, I'm faltering, on which indicator I'm doing better. So you have all of 12 indicators. So on the basis of those 12 indicators, then I can talk about the strategies, right? So I think that, going down further with this composite index will not help you. It's just like, going to a doctor and the doctor says that your health index is 0.45. It doesn't help you. The doctor has to tell you that this is your problem, this is your disease, right? So your composite health index is 0.45. That doesn't help you. So it's just like it's same. Actually, composite index is not, giving you enough information to act on specific policies. For specific policies, you need the indicators.
No, Chen, I think you are absolutely right that, these composite indices hide a lot, many things. And if you really want to have specific policy intervention, the roadmap, you need to look at the disaggregation. Certainly, I mean, all the 12 indicators, perhaps even going down further into disaggregation, factor to decide the nature of intervention. By the way, nobody noticed that the chairman was out of touch for 10 minutes because there is no power here. I just finally managed to connect in my mobile phone. So
great,
I have
great that you are back. It's really good.
I mean,
I was looking for you.
Another 5 minutes.
No. Please go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Can I promote? Since I have to leave, I would just make one or two observations and then request Professor Mohanty to take over.
Yeah.
Right? If the discussion continues, is that all right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And Pramod, believe me, it is sheer luck that I could connect you with my mobile, and mobile has some power. Otherwise, my hotel has absolutely no power. And it ran for 30 minutes and then it conked off. Now, my first question, Achin, I don't know whether somebody asked it already because I missed it. You gave this UNDP's formula as X minus X min divided by X max minus X min. right?
Mhm.
That is for education and health, and for income, you take log, right?
Yes,
That
yes.
was what, that was, sorry, you correct me because you have been working in this for such a long time. You kindly correct me. I thought this is what they did from 1990 onwards. And now they have changed it completely now. They are taking X minus goalpost, minimum goalpost, divided by maximum goalpost minus minimum goalpost.
Yeah.
So there are goalposts. So because they wanted to have temporal comparability, and since max and mean values change from year to year, there cannot be any comparability, and that's why they have decided to replace this range equalization method by the goalpost method, wherein over time the maximum and minimum for education and health are decided. And as far as income is concerned, they have taken 40,000, as the highest, and above 40,000, anything is considered to be equal to 40,000. That was my first question. That how come you did not mention that there is a shift? Now, presently, HDIs are being calculated on the basis of the goalpost method. I'm taking. Is that all right? So you said. Then I can move to the next point.
Okay, just quickly. Is it that from 1990, there's a little bit of changes here and there, because as you know that initially it was shortfall rather than achievement, because X minus X min, instead of that, you had earlier X max minus X, right, initially. And then quickly they changed it to achievement rather than shortfall. That's the first change that they made. Second, that this transformation formula is more or less the same, but only the income component they have made a lot of experiments. First it was a modified Atkinson formula. At the beginning it was logarithm, and then modified Atkinson formula, and then they changed it to logarithm again. So I
know on income they have made a lot of experiment, but please, Achin, you and me and others will have to check that from 2010 onwards, the health and education indicators are not being calculated on the basis of max minus min. It is being calculated by goalpost method. So, which makes things comparable.
No, I agree. I mean, by max.
If that is the case,
no. Max.
The moment,
max doesn't...
no, just let me say. If that is the case, no value can be zero, because the minimum value is generally taken to be less than the minimum of the countries. That is one thing.
Yeah. Then the point is that
so the geometric mean will not become zero, because the no value will become zero. So many of your other arguments will be not correct, because your maximum minus minimum things has changed.
No,
that's my first point.
Okay, can I respond to your point? Yeah. The point is that if you look at life expectancy at birth, it's 83.5 is the upper, 20 is the minimum. So what you are saying is correct. That is, no country actually has 20 years of life expectancy at this point. Okay, fine. Now the point is that if the goalposts have to be outside the actual range of values, then it can be anywhere, right? It's arbitrary. So earlier it was 25, now it is 20, sometimes it is 30, so it can be anywhere. My point is that it would be very sensitive to that. That means where you put your goalposts, it would be very sensitive.
You are absolutely right, but you are right, but you did not make that point. Number one. Number two, the whole exercise has been done for the last 15 years or 14 years without any change in the maximum and minus. So this question of your extending an arbitrariness does not come in, because from 2010 onwards, if I remember, maximum minus minimum has been kept constant. That is number one. The second point, I don't want to get into all the other details. Second point is, sorry. Oh God.
Now, since you are in a hurry, I'll give you the responses in writing.
No. The second point is,
please.
The second point is the geometric mean. The substitutability, non-substitutability is not the issue. Because if you say non-substitutable, then the point that you made in Benares, and you also made it here, then you should say incomplete measure, which means unless a state, Bihar, is lower than Maharashtra in education, in health, and in income, I will not call Bihar to be less than Maharashtra. That is non-substitutability. That all the three, for a state to be higher than a second state, it has to be higher in all the three. So both, whether you add it up or you multiply. and take
Right.
the geometric mean. There is substitutability. But the point is, why do you prefer the geometric mean? The reason is that if there is high disparity between education, health, and income for any state, it will get a geometric mean, will give a lower value. So actually, it is discounting. It is rate of substitution becomes lower. You get my point. If a state has got total, all the three added up is perhaps 30. And if you take geometric mean will be, if they are equal, all 10, 10, 10, that will be maximum. If you take arithmetic mean, if there is inequality, it will be less. So geometric mean, in a way, corrects for inequality in all the three dimensions. If there is inequality, suppose there is inequality, then your partial differential coefficient will say that if you improve that dimension where it is lower, then it will get a higher payoff. You see, the point is, it is the inequality which is being corrected for through the geometric mean, that all the three components, if for a state it is equal, then it will have a very high value. The moment there is inequality, it will be lower. That is the reason. And finally, the point that you talked about rural and urban, you see? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you said that, the higher the value, suppose from 40, it goes down to 35. Is this a better achievement than 20 to 15? Which one is a better achievement? 40 to 35 or 20 to 15? Reduction is same as 5 percentage points. That is the point that you have elaborated very well, saying that it is not the base. It depends on where poverty reduction is easier. From 20 to 15 or 10 to 5, that may become even more difficult. As poverty level is going down, it may be more difficult. So you can't simply look at the absolute differences. You have to decide whether you can divide by the base year. And that there is a judgmental factor, that where poverty reduction is easier, from 90 to 85 is easier, or 20 to 15 is easier. So that judgmental factor, I think I would entirely agree with you. Okay, my constraint is my battery in my mobile. Yes, go ahead. Hello.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Professor Kundu. And I entirely agree with your second point, and I have some points to make on the first. But anyway, so since you have to leave,
But I'm here. I'm here for another 5 minutes. My mobile is still live. It's my mobile, because my computer has conked off.
Actually, the point that you have made about this geometric mean formula, that inequality actually gets reflected there. Absolutely
Right.
Right. I mean, I fully agree with that. And that is exactly the property of geometric mean, that, inequality across dimensions. That means,
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Inequality across dimensions get reflected. But the other point.
So we are on the same plane then. And I would request Professor Mahanti to continue the discussion, because my mobile is going to conk off any moment. So Professor Mahanti, can you take over if there is some question and answers? I'm sorry that this happened in a Devghar is a very bad city as far as power is concerned. So electricity has gone off for 2 hours now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for coming, and very useful remarks here. And,
Thank you, Pramod. Thank you, Pramod. I had few more points, but since I don't want to disturb the whole thing, because I think you continue with that, and I will write to Pramod you and also to Dr. Chakravarti directly to share 1 or 2 other minor points. Thank you.
We'll facilitate, and if anybody else also wants to write, please write to us. We'll
Certainly, and you can circulate it, my points on this lecture. Okay.
Sure, sir.
Kundu sir, we welcome you to GIDS, sir. Please come.
Okay. Next time, Pramod should not have a long distance meeting. He should have a personal meeting so that I can come and stay there. Okay. There's no technical issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. All is in place of Mohanty ji now.
I have already told what I have to say earlier. The only thing I could say here, this argument, geometric mean, then the lot of indexes, all these can be solved, or all these can be removed, provided this problem can be made an optimization model. And I have already told you analytical point of view, this problem should have been taken instead of so many subjective parameters were assumed. Nobody is questioning the parameters which were taken subjectively because there must be some logic. Sorry, but however, optimization model, particularly multi-criteria decision making with fuzzy model, with analytical point of view, and taking the qualitative statements or qualitative terms and making it quantifiable by using fuzzy logic will solve all these subjectiveness, parametric problems, and it will give a viable model. That's what I would like to say.
Professor Mantik, may I come here? Hello,
Yeah.
am I audible? Professor
Yeah.
Mantik, I know since I worked on this optimization method for a number of indicators, there are statistical measures to take x1, x2, x3, xn. And now you don't have the weightages for x1, x2. And if you put a normative judgment, then of course you are subjective. There are all the statistical methods of optimization have properties like maximizing the sum total of squares of correlation. This is principal component analysis. Now that optimization may not be socially acceptable. It's not be development context, it may not be acceptable. It is a statistical measure of optimization of the squares of correlations. You're right, the principal component analysis like method which optimizes, it really optimizes a statistical property. Whether that statistical property has a proper developmental implication is something that I've analyzed in one of my research paper, which is published in UN, saying the statistical method of optimizing some total of squares of correlation Z value need not necessarily answer the development maximization. That is my submission.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt?
Please go ahead. I've finished. I've finished, and I hope I will be able to listen to your comment.
Dr. Kundu, I am not talking about what you have told. Neither I am disputing it. I am only suggesting a new one, that is multi-criteria decision making with a fuzzy approach. Plus, anything which is statistical, then it can be extended to stochastic optimization. And it is not single optimization the way it is available, optimization problem. It is a multi-objective optimization with fuzzy, which is different from the generic optimization problems.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I've learned a lot of things from this brief statement. I think we have to sit together and sort out this stochastic probabilistic optimization issues. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Mohanty, it is again a non-parametric method, and there are plenty of it. Every this kind of method has its merits and demerits. It's not that it is the optimal or it is the very ideal method. Which my student has done PhD just a few days back.
Any idea cannot be perfectly meritorious, neither it can be demeritorious. Every idea can be extended to the new one. So this is some suggestion. It can be improved also.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Is there anyone else? So Galav is there with us. So Galav, are you there?
I don't think so. We can conclude. What is the answer?
Okay, Mohanty ji, if there is no further question, the young generation.
It's already left.
Yeah.
So I have question to Achin Chakrabarti sir directly related to MPI of two different round of NFH. First was based on NFHS 4 and second is on NFHS 5. So when comparing, and government saying is that reduction in multidimensional poverty. So here my question is, do you think the decline in number of poor is mainly due to increase in water and sanitation measures, as well as the number of opening of new bank account as well as maternal health care, especially number of 4NC for last birth. Do you agree with?
Yeah, actually, you can decompose this multidimensional poverty. They have done that. In fact, they have even given these bar diagrams where these two rounds of NFHs where we stand in terms of each indicator. And if you see that banking, between the two rounds of NFHs, it has changed very little actually. So it's already, it only, 5% or so, and it becomes 3.8 or something. So from 5 point something to 3 point something. So it has not, it doesn't have a lot of weight to MPI. But what you were saying is that in terms of this maternal health, I think probably its contribution is more. So, so there are some indicators whose contribution is more than others, and that has to be the case. And you can figure it out from the decomposition analysis.
Especially water and sanitation, access to
Yes.
pipe facility as well as access to pipe water in rural areas. That's why.
And that is also that is also a point of contention, because many people argue that even water is just having the piped connection that doesn't mean that you have a assured source of water. Similarly for sanitation, that just having toilet doesn't mean that you are using it. So all kinds of these issues actually have come up.
But at least I think multidimensional is making attempt to count for health, education, and those indicators. Earlier it was only say economic. If per capita income is high, we say the poverty is less. It was basically only economic indicators. Now at least.
So yeah, for income it's now 7 indicators related to a standard of living. So that is more comparable and more measurable other than the income.
Mohanty ji, your bell is ringing.
So yeah, you see that, I mean, this multidimensional poverty, once you reach that, it's for each indicator, it comes close to 100%, the coverage. If the coverage comes close to 100%, then your multidimensional poverty will be close to zero, right? So, so in other words, these are some of the indicators which have a kind of secular trend. That means, it goes up. The coverage actually goes up. And also this, think about maternal health and think about schooling. So it doesn't fall, right? I mean, usually it goes up. So you'll see a steady decline in MPI over time, no doubt about it. So that's why people argued that, maybe this can be a complementary to your earlier consumption-based poverty, because consumption-based poverty can capture some fluctuations. For instance, 2017-18, which actually was not published, and some people commented on that MPC actually didn't go up there. So like that. So in other words, that MPI will steadily fall for the very structure of it, because the structure and the indicators are such that it will steadily decline. But one point is important, as I said, that how you actually evaluate or assess the declines. That is something which is crucial, because sometimes you say that, it's an MPI from 20 to 10. Is it a bigger decline, or it is 50 to 40, right? So 50 to 40 or 10 to or 20 to 10, in both cases, it's 10 percentage points, right? Now, but you need some kind of value judgment on that. And that is why I showed that improvement index and all, because improvement index actually takes into account that kind of value judgment. So this is a point which I think we need to consider further. So that's why, I mean, anyway, so we can go on discussing that. But what I'm saying is that this normative measurement or ethical measurement as opposed to statistical measurement. Statistical measurement actually comes out of the nature of the data itself. For instance, principal component analysis, you actually, it is a composite index. The first principal component is a composite index, but it's a weighted sum of it. Now, this weighted sum, actually, the weights are proportional to the variability of the variables, right? The variability of the variables. Now, you might say that, the ethical importance of the variable is not being considered. All is considered is that the variability of the variable. So variability has nothing to do with its normative importance. So that's why we need normative aggregation rather than statistical aggregation. So this point actually I would emphasize, and this is widely known actually, this point. So it is a normative exercise. It's not statistical exercise. I mean, I'll disagree with Professor Mohanty on that it is not a statistical exercise. It's not an optimization exercise. It's a normative exercise to aggregate information, on the basis of certain value judgment. And value judgment is everywhere. I mean, which indicators are going to include, which are going to be excluded, all are value judgment, right? I mean, you don't have any formula for that. You don't have any statistical way of dealing with that, right? So, so I think that's and every stage actually you have to take a normative position on these things, whether banking should be included or not. Now, this can go on, this debate. I mean, there is no resolution actually on this, that whether banking should be included or not.
Professor Garland has.
Yeah, Professor Garland. Yeah. Please go ahead.
The multidimensional poverty is a summary statistics of the different indicators we consider to look at the development, right? Fine. But when you want to make an intervention, policy intervention, we have to look at each component of it and you have to reflect.
Sure.
That's quite obvious kind of thing. But when you're talking about that, are you talking about the interrelationship among the different components of multiple poverty index? Suppose when we worked on the Telangana Human Development Report, first report in 2014. Excuse me. Student Gudru. And education and health, the components we have taken. So that means I'm also looking at the issue of transmission of income to other components of health and education. That kind of proposition need to be taken into consideration when you're talking about making a detailed analysis and interpretation of these results of multi-poverty. That's very, very important, I think. Because for the policy things you can do it for fine, but as an analytical view, you should need to look into that how the incomes is crucial, because if income, suppose a health problem is there, it would translate to lakhs of rupees with a poor man, then the whole income he earned will go up. The risk and uncertainty involved in health has not been taken into cognizance somewhere in this index. That's my point. Ultimately, risk it is not grounded in risk and uncertainties kind of things with respect to specifically health. Education is fine, and you have problems in income.
Yeah, Professor Kalab, I think that the multidimensional poverty index is not designed to answer all our research questions or analytical questions, because analytical questions have to be posed and addressed with the right kind of data and right kind of method. So multidimensional index, any multidimensional index, not only just poverty, but also human development, these are actually policymakers, it's a kind of tournament kind of thing. I mean, just the UNDP actually shows to the countries, it's a kind of ranking in the tournament. So you are here, you are here, you are here. But further than that, there's no analytical point there. No analytical point is made by doing that. I think there is a purpose there. The purpose is that with this ranking and comparing that ranking with your GDP per capita, and then you show that, okay, SDI ranking and GDP per capita ranking exactly don't coincide. So there are some differences here and there. And those differences actually matter. That means your GDP per capita, you are high, and SDI, you are low. So you better look at your human development issues. That much it can say, but other than that, it doesn't say anything. It cannot say it cannot answer any analytical concerns that you are raising. So I think that you are absolutely right that for our specific analytical queries, I think we have to go beyond this composite index. I mean, we need to look at other kinds of information. Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think the problem is with MPI measurement. We have checked the previous measures at the state level. Every state was having a head count or some measure of poverty index. We don't have now.
Yes.
Now the state government is also going for MPI only. If it is not analytical and it is not usable at the decentralized level, then why are we going?
No,
for
I think, yeah, I think that the one purpose that I can still see is that when you know, this finance commission, 16th finance commission considers different states and all, and then in the formula probably they give some weightage to MPI, maybe. So that's the only purpose that for which actually this kind of composite index has been used in the past. But other than that, I think that composite index doesn't help you to understand the specific policy issues, right? But Niti Aayog will, I mean, I think that there is always a kind of tournament kind of idea in our mind, right? I mean, you always make the states like, you know, competing with each other and competing with each other on the basis of this ranking and all, right? So ranking actually there has huge attraction, ranking. So the policymakers, they love ranking.
We need to have MPI along with that. Poverty index is required for policy purpose. This is not useful. I think we need the.
Yeah, I mean, when you know, this MPI formula actually gets into your allocation question, like, you know, finance commission allocation and all, then I think it's very serious, and one has to raise all kinds of questions that whether it's giving a proper kind of or fair kind of allocation or not. And that fairness actually has anything to do with this MPI values and all. Now, those are the other normative questions, and we have to go on discussing those normative questions.
Not only distribution by the finance commission, but distribution within the state, within districts, within blocks.
Oh, sure.
Something else, not MPI.
Yeah, and state finance commissions actually do recommend on the basis of some backwardness indicator or something, right? I mean, all the state finance commissions, when they talk about this distribution across blocks, even panchayats, they have some formula where one part is population definitely, but the other part is some kind of backwardness index, right? So
Kerala has a problem now. The southern states also a problem now. The fertility rate is going down. The population growth is going down, and they're contributing much to the pooling incomes of the country. But in turn, they're not getting that share they required. The Kerala is in crisis.
So
that's a different issue, of course.
Yeah, that's a I mean, finance commission will have more trouble in future because many states are going the Kerala way now. Yeah.
But sir, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So in addition to Pramod sir question, one.
Just to interrupt.
My name, sir.
Dr. Pramod.
Good evening, sir.
Dr. Pramod.
Mohanty.
Hello.
Yeah, Mohanty, boliye.
I have a class at 5:30, so I have to leave.
No problem. We will be concluding with his question, and then there will be vote of thanks. A reply from Achin, and then vote of thanks. Yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank
the
you.
last question.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you have to conclude.
Sir, in addition,
conclude by 5.
Okay.
In addition to the SARS answer, the question. In one area, poverty, one area, the conditions which indicators of poverty is, I think the one area, poverty is not poverty in other area. So in addition to that point, I want to add, I think the geographical cluster poverty indicates, is it good for measuring the poverty? And also second, my point is the geographical cluster poverty indicators. Second is that the level of satisfaction with the of people with the resources that they have. So because I think is a good indicator to fix up the this poverty indicators, because whatever lavish things in those days, in 10 years back, now they became a necessary things. So I think once the mobile was lavish, now it is necessary. So I think that
See that, I mean, this
there would be difficulty in fixing up poverty indicators.
Sure. We keep discussing these things. For instance, you know, think about NFH's data. NFH's data now still on wealth or assets they're collecting something, some information on something. But some of the things actually it's changing quite fast, like, having bicycle or something. I mean, who has this, having bicycle is no possession at all nowadays. I mean, having a two-wheeler could be, or four-wheeler could be, I mean, like that. So there are still some indicators in our asset list, basket. You find that, they are changing fast. I mean, they have no relevance now. So I think you are right that, over time, we have to change some of these indicator baskets and to capture in a better way. But your point about satisfaction with whatever, like services or position or that, satisfaction is something very tricky thing. Now, you remember that Amartya Sen's that the problem of happy poor. I mean, the problem of happy poor. And that is exactly why Amartya Sen brought in this capability approach. Because the problem of happy poor, the utilitarian approach or happiness or desire fulfillment, preference satisfaction, that kind of interpretation, I think, is tricky. It's dangerous because you can make the poor people happy with whatever little that you give, but actual functioning levels or capability, still they are poor. So I think that it's always better to stick to these observable indicators of functioning rather than, this satisfaction with. But that could be a separate study. That is, when the government wants to know that how satisfied are people with their service delivery. Now, service delivery and satisfaction, that's a completely different kind of exercise. So satisfaction cannot enter into any poverty index as such.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you.
So,
Okay.
Should we move to final vote of thanks then? Yeah.
If there is no other question, yeah.
Yeah. I thank the
Jessica,
speaker.
my colleague, will be giving vote of thanks.
I thank the speaker, Professor Achin, for giving us such an interesting lecture and opening the Pandora box. There are questions and questions, and still there are some unanswered questions. I thank the chairperson who left but made this entire discussion very interesting, Professor Kundu. And I also thank the discussant, Professor Mohanty, for giving a very insightful comments and suggestion. I thank the online audience and all those who attended physically here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.